Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for joining another episode of Canada Today with Taha Ghayyur, airing on Muslim Network TV. I'm happy to welcome you to another exciting show. Today we have some very relevant or very timely conversation that we're going to be presenting to you with two individuals who know what they're doing when it comes to this conversation. And this is a conversation that is happening almost in every household across Canada and across probably the world, because everybody's concerned about their kids and their kids going back to school. And kids themselves are concerned. There's hardly a talk show, there's hardly a day where there's actually no news about either schools not being ready or school boards not being ready to welcome students back in a timely fashion, or parents having anxiety or even second thoughts about sending their kids to school once again. So to address some of the, I guess an alternative, which is a homeschooling model, we have two guests that we're going to be talking to, and they're two wonderful people I've personally known for quite some time. To start off, I want to bring in and invite Munazza Mukri. She is a co-founder of the successful organization called Toronto Muslim Homeschoolers. She works as an administrator for Toronto Muslim Homeschooler for the past 12 years and she teaches history, geography, and world religions subjects on Zoom. Munazza also runs a successful outdoor education and culinary program, which has been in existence for the past 3 years. On top of her endeavors in promoting success or access to education, Munazza is also a business owner and head chef of the Urban Villager Catering and Cafe. So welcome to the program, Sister Munazza.
Thank you. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Thank
I'm
you.
happy to be here today.
Great, thank you. And we're looking forward to having a great conversation with you. Next, I would like to welcome Omar Zia. He is a writer, educator, and who works with the Peel School Board, a district school board, or PDSB in Ontario. And he's also a well-known lecturer and workshop facilitator and khatib in Toronto area. Omar has earned a Bachelor's of Science, Bachelor's of Education, as well as a Master of Education degree, all again in Ontario in Canada. Omar is also a qualified principal and an Ontario certified teacher with specializations in English as a second language, special education, and guidance counseling. Brother Omar Zia currently works as a vice principal at the Streetsville Secondary School in Mississauga, and he teaches part-time at the Queen's University. Brother Omar also has previously studied Islam under numerous well-known Muslim scholars in Ontario, in Canada. And Brother Omar is a good friend and somebody who has made some positive impact on many youth and community members in the Greater Toronto area. So thank you, Brother Omar, for joining us as well today.
Jazakallah khairan. Thank you for having me on the show.
Great. Let's have let's get started on this question of what to do with our kids as the schools reopen. And as we are aware, there's a lot of anxiety around this issue, both among parents, teachers, as well as, of course, kids themselves. So what would this new year look like? Nobody really knows when it comes to post-pandemic or really even during pandemic school reopening. So, Sister Munazza, we would like to start off with you. And since we're talking about homeschooling being an alternative, you coming from a solid homeschooling background, mashallah, you have 3 kids between ages of 10 and 18. You have homeschooled for over 15 years now. What made you start the homeschooling process? I mean, what moved you, what motivated you to think of this as an alternative and being sort of an outlier and one of those odd ones out there who decided to homeschool their kids?
Yeah. Yeah, my dad always told me that I always do something that goes against the grain. So this just kind of fell into place as well. So, ever since I was in school, I went to public school here in Toronto. It was a good experience, but there was just something that I found was lacking for myself personally. I just found that, it didn't encourage critical thinking. And I thought when I have my kids, that I didn't want them to be a part of that. And alhamdulillah, I had that option available to me. I was able to financially be able to stay at home as well, so that was a perk for me. And I just really I wanted my children to be critical thinkers, know that there's a world outside the classroom. And for me, especially when they're younger, the world is a big place, and for them, I just wanted to bring reality whatever they saw and heard, and because that was their world and their understanding. And I just felt like that would they wouldn't have that opportunity in school, and I can pick up their weaknesses and their strengths and really encourage that. So that was our main intention to homeschool.
Interesting. Well, thank you for sharing that. And Brother Omar, I mean, you are an educator. You are working in the traditional mainstream public school systems for how many years now? What, good 20 years, I guess, I believe.
21 years now, yep. I'm entering my 22nd year.
Oh my God, mashallah. But you actually decided to do something that most teachers in such schools wouldn't do, and you decided to actually homeschool your daughters. And I know you have experimented with I guess with both now. So tell us about your journey to homeschooling and your rationale behind homeschooling while you're teaching yourself in public school system.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. People often do ask me that question. My colleagues, other administrators kind of make a joke about it, that here I am teaching for the publicly funded board, and yet I am homeschooling my own kids. So I'm a product of the education system here in Ontario, Canada. And having gone to school myself, I have experienced the good and the bad of both sides of publicly funded schools, and or schooling in general, I would say. And as I saw my kids grow, I could see the limitations provided through public schools, specifically around curriculum. So as a teacher myself, the curriculum is designed to catch all students. And what ends up happening is that students who can flourish beyond the curriculum are limited in terms of their growth. And the kids who are struggling don't have the direct support required, and so they fall through the cracks, and long term, they end up not being successful overall through their schooling career. So seeing that huge gap and looking at the way my daughters were both developing, I could see that they were ready to move beyond the curriculum. In fact, I thought to myself, if I put my daughter into junior kindergarten at age 4 when she was already reading at a grade 2 level, I would be stunting her growth, and I would be asking her to kind of dumb herself down to the curriculum at hand. So homeschooling provides a lot more flexibility in terms of what we teach our kids. And as Mr. Munazza mentioned, critical thinking skills, issues of equity, issues of social justice are things that we can definitely bring into the curriculum that we have at home that regular public school curriculum doesn't necessarily follow or introduce. Another big part about it is actually interaction. Kids are not born with manners. And so when kids go to school, they learn manners through interactions with other kids their own age. And as a result of that whole process is that there is a lot of bullying that happens. I've witnessed this as a student attending these schools as a young person, but also I have seen this as a teacher as well. And part of that bullying, a lot of it reflects upon the identities of a student. So it could be gender bias that they experience. It could be bias against their identity as a Muslim. It could be their identity as a top level student. Teased by different names like nerd and browner. Even cultural racism as well, like being called Paki, for example, being called terrorist. These are normal in everyday life for a student attending public schools, in schools in general. So in order to shade and to protect our children from that, we chose to homeschool. Why is that such a big deal? Shouldn't kids actually experience bullying? Wouldn't that make them better people? Well, again, in my experience as a guidance counselor, the students I work with most are kids who were put down while they were young by both teachers and their peers. And when they get to grade 9, grade 10, they're not able to function on a social emotional level, nor on an academic level as well. And so these are the two main reasons we looked at homeschooling, but there's a number of reasons as well.
I'm sure there could be other motivations that you and I have who homeschool. What I find interesting is that none of you, at least so far, have mentioned anything specifically about, you know, religion being a reason necessarily, or religious education being one. And not that is not a good reason not to homeschool for those who want to. Of course, everybody has different reasons and personal stories and circumstances. But it's interesting. Majority of the homeschoolers, you know, I have spoken to, and us being one, our family being one of them as well. You know, it always comes down to kind of reasons that I'm hearing from both of you, and that is quality of education. Who is the manager of your education? You know, my wife, just like you, Brother Omar, is one of those who, you know, is a qualified teacher, went to the teachers college, and that's where she decided that, you know what, you know, if you want to have quality of education and you want to meet the ideals of education that our teachers college talk about, then the best teacher and educator is you, the parent. Of course, everybody's circumstances are different. Not everybody can do it necessarily, but this was a conclusion that she herself came to, and just like all of you and many of us, many of the homeschoolers come to that conclusion naturally. So I wanted to ask you, Sister Munazza, help us understand what is homeschooling, because there are all sorts of, I mean, I don't want to even talk right now about the myths and the misconceptions about it, which I want to get to in a minute. But help us understand what does homeschooling look like? For a lot of people, all sorts of images conjure up and come up in their minds when they think about homeschooling. And you know, does that mean that you and your kids sit at home all day long? What does a day look like typically? And does it mean that once you're in homeschooling that you can never get out of it and you're stuck for the rest of the child's you know, life until they graduate or supposedly go to university? So help us understand that sort of the whole journey. How does that work for a person who has never done homeschooling, never seen homeschooling before?
Right. Well, I'm actually going to start off with a bit of a myth about homeschooling, just to kind of start off with, because when people think of homeschooling, they think of bringing the school at home. And that is very, that can be very intimidating, because the first question they kind of ask, or the first thing that they notice about themselves, well, I'm not a teacher. So how will I be able to teach my children if I'm not a qualified teacher? So, and, you know, I don't have a proper classroom. You know, I don't have a desk. You know, I can't give them 8 hours a day. So all these ideas come in their mind, because we're basically, we just assume what we were taught and the environment we were taught. So we kind of go in with that mindset. And it is definitely not any of that. You know, you could definitely, you don't need to be a teacher, a qualified teacher. You don't need to spend 8 hours a day with your children. You know, the school system is designed to manage 30 kids. So that 8 hours a day is being distributed amongst 30 children or so. And, you know, but as at home, when it's just you and your kids, you're down to, let's say you have 2, 3, the ratio could be even 5 to 1. It's much lower. So you really don't need to put as much time as you may think you do. Now, it does get a little, depending on your personality, you know, if you're easygoing, you know, things go, you know, you're okay with things not going smoothly, you know, because the thing is that when you're bringing school into your home, you have everything else that you're dealing with in the house as well. So that includes taking care of your house, the meals or phone calls or elderly parents, whatever it is. So everything is going on. Nothing, you can't get rid of many things that you have to do at home. And now you have education to supplement as well. Now, some people can see that as being a challenge and a disadvantage, but I always welcome new things that my children are being exposed to, and that's part of the reason why I really enjoy homeschooling, because we may not be able to you know, learning isn't just about what you do at a desk. Learning is much, much more than that. And most homeschoolers go in with that mindset. It's about life skills. It's about how to deal with people. It's about critical thinking, and a lot of that you can't do that in a classroom. So to describe a typical day, I wouldn't be able. I can give you not every day is different.
Mhm.
Every day is definitely different, and it depends what happens in
Mhm.
the night before or the morning. And that's a good skill to teach the children too, because they have to learn to adapt to things not going their way all the time, or a schedule. So there's a lot of, aside from the actual formality of teaching your children what they need to learn, because a lot of people just think that that's what homeschooling is just math, language, and art or science experiments, that kind of thing. But there's so much more that we're able to teach our children and instill in our children because we homeschool.
Mhm.
And so it's and people forget that aspect of it. Our children are constantly learning, and they're picking up our good habits, and they're picking up our bad habits too. So that's, there's that challenge as well. But
Mhm.
it's really not as it's something new for sure, but it's nothing that nobody can do. I always tell a new homeschooler that the two things that you should have in homeschooling is the love of learning and patience. That's really the two things that you really need to be a good homeschooler, I think.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Um, so, Brother Omar, you talked about some of your motivations of homeschooling, and I wanted to hear from you, on a couple of things. Number one, I want to go back to what's happening, of course, right now. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of people talking about alternatives, all sorts of options. I wanted to ask you first of all, is there a distinction between, and in fact, both of you can talk to this, between the traditional homeschooling that you both are into and that you both are practicing for quite some time, versus the forced sort of virtual learning at home that is happening. Are these the same things, or you see a distinction? And if yes, then we need to make sure what we are clear about what we are, of course, talking about here when we are having this conversation. So, Brother Omar, I want to ask you that question first, and then Sister Munazza, you can chime in as well.
Thank you. So traditional homeschooling is far different than public schooling, whether public schooling is face-to-face or online. You're still following the curriculum to some degree. Just a moment ago, a screen was shared where those are the charts that my family and I had developed before we actually got into homeschooling. So we were clear in terms of what we are doing in terms of as homeschoolers versus the traditional public school system or schooling system. And one of the biggest areas around homeschooling, although there's flexibility, as mentioned by Sister Munazza, and every day is different, there is still some structure. Within the chaos of every day, there's a structure that we still follow, because the concept of education at home is not just on curriculum. It's focusing on all parts of life. So whether that's dhikr in the morning, prayer halfway through the day, or various times in the day, incorporating an understanding of gratefulness for our existence, by remembering the Creator as we go through the various points of learning in the day, versus virtual schooling, which is now being offered as an alternate for kids or parents who don't want their children going to school for fear of acquiring COVID or any other illness for that matter. The virtual school, it's not going to be the same. Number one, the person who's behind on the other side of the screen is not the parent. That teacher is still teaching 30, maybe even more kids. As a summer school online teacher, I've got 60 kids in my class. So you can imagine the lack of time that a child would receive even during virtual schooling versus the traditional homeschooling model, where you've got basically 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 or 1-to-4, depending on how many parents and kids you've got in your home environment. Far different than the virtual school. As well, because you have direct access to your parent, in traditional homeschooling, you're able to learn alongside your parent. Parents learn alongside their children. Questions are being answered simultaneously at the same time. In virtual schooling, depending on how it's set up, there might be live classes 1-to-1. It might be that you have to email and wait for another day or 2 days before the teacher gets back to you. Every board is looking at a different way of having virtual online schooling right now, and elementary different than secondary. So It really is going to be board by board,
Yes.
even school by school for that matter. Some teachers are comfortable with Google Classroom, some are not. Some are good with 21st century learning and are competent with using virtual tools to teach online. Others are not. And many families experience that during the March to the end of June time period. We are hopeful that now that teachers have had a chance to kind of become acclimatized to on the online environment, they would hopefully do a better job and be more attuned as to how to better serve the students that we're serving. Brightspace is another opportunity that's provided by the ministry, which for high school students that are credit-bearing courses, and the courses are available so students can work at their own pace with the guidance of a facilitator or a teacher. So it really is going to depend on what grade your child is in, and also what method your board decides to choose. But the reality is that homeschooling traditionally is far different and far more supportive as a model of learning than even the virtual online alternative being provided today.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, because you answered a question that I'm sure a lot of parents have, and they're asking about what will the school look like when the kids go back to school, whether physically or virtually, and what are some of the options that are available. And well, it's good to hear what you have just shared and that distinction. Sister Munazza, do you want to add something to what Brother Omar just said?
Yeah, I think virtual school is, I agree with Brother Omar that virtual school is definitely not homeschooling, although you may think that because you're at home and you're schooling that's homeschooling, but it's very different. It's a completely different approach. It's a different philosophy. You can definitely add to it. You can incorporate the element of homeschooling into this into the virtual programs that your children are in, and that'll be great. I mean, you can start with that if you want to if you're not ready to completely plunge into the homeschooling philosophy. I mean, that's a starting point, but it's definitely different. It's not comparable to that. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I see you are sitting, Mr. Munazza, outside. I don't know if it's your backyard, but it seems like you're homeschooled, mashallah. I mean, this is probably some of, if not a lot of your homeschooling happens. And I think that's part of that whole philosophy that, world is your school. So entire world you can learn from, and there's so much to learn, alhamdulillah. So I love, the fact that you are actually sitting, in a nice, beautiful, picturesque environment. And so I wanted to talk about a little bit about, Brother Omar, and we'll start with you. What are some of the benefits? Because you see a contrast on a daily basis. You are a public school teacher, and you are homeschooling your kids. And one of your daughters recently went to school as well. What benefits have you seen in homeschooling that you have not seen in a public school system, and which is why you, of course, continue to homeschool? Were there any pleasant surprises that you saw when you guys started homeschooling? I wanted to hear this. I know you did allude to some of them, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on this topic as on a personal level.
So I think probably the greatest opportunity I've had is in the various roles I've had in education is actually as a guidance counselor, which I did for a decade. And in that role, every time I'd come home, I would be very thankful that we had chosen homeschooling as an education model for our children. And the main reason is the psychological safety that a child experiences in their home environment. Whereas in the school environment, the constant pressure that kids are under to act a certain way, talk a certain way, walk a certain way, they act differently from one group of friends to another group of friends, from one classroom to another classroom, from one teacher to another teacher. That creates almost like a multiple personality develops inside the psyche of a child. So when I would come home and I see my kids having a consistent environment that they could grow in, I found them flourishing in that environment as well. So my elder daughter ended up going to grade 8 this past year. And for the first 4 months, she did relatively fine until September to December. She was okay getting, becoming acquainted with what public school is all about, interacting with other peers her own age. But we did find a lot of elements of of gender bias. A lot of misogyny was happening in her school environment. It was apparent that the administrators and teachers seemed to either lack awareness of it or didn't really seem to know what to do about it or didn't even want to do anything about it at all. Which is very disheartening for her, for all of us. And speaking with other people of other families who attend that school, they found a very similar experience. And when we got to about February, she really was missing being homeschooled. So when COVID came around and she got to stay home, she was actually very thankful to re-enter that homeschooling environment and feel that psychological safety. Also, without that pressure, the peer pressure that existed in grade 8, when she was re-entering the homeschool environment, but still accessing the online learning from her public school, she was doing better and was more dedicated, was more interested, and providing a lot more focus towards her studies during that time. And rather than focusing on peer-to-peer interactions and that pressure, she was able to focus more on the academics and actually took pride in the work that she was doing and did a lot better post-March break than she was doing before that academically. So this is what I personally found that when I would come home and see the difference and see that, again, psychological safety. And then there are other elements, but psychological safety is not just about feeling safe and being in a safe environment, it's being with the one who's your primary caregiver, one of your parents or both of your parents. Being able to do some homeschooling myself on the weekends or during the summers or during the breaks that we would have, or even after school sometimes, provided me an opportunity to also reach out to my children and learn with them too, and demonstrate good learning and good work ethic when it comes to academic success. But also, again, because we're focusing on the whole of life, a lot of it had to do with day-to-day living and learning how to not just tie your shoelaces, but how to do dishes, how to vacuum, how to mow the lawn, how to shovel the driveway. These are things that, so I can retire early, I guess. But the idea was that you learned a lot of everyday living, doing your own laundry. By the time you're 6 years old, doing your own laundry, things that kids don't learn till they're much later on, maybe in university or even beyond that. So there's a lot of opportunities to learn and then to incorporate the Islamic identity as part of everyday living. So it's not an add-on. We just pray 5 times a day. Rather, Islam became part of the character development of our children through homeschooling, which is not something we would be able to provide in a public school setting.
Very interesting. Sister Munazza, what were some of the highlights for you in terms of benefits you have seen in your own kids' journey during homeschooling?
Yeah, I realize that our audience is possibly there are some homeschoolers here, but there's a lot of kids, a lot of parents whose kids are going to public school, and I'm trying to enter their mind, and I'm thinking all they're thinking is that they'll be great cleaners, and they'll be patient, and they'll do all that, and it's like, where does the learning happen, and that's completely, like, the learning does happen. I mean, we're not just so loosey goosey. I mean, I'm a little bit of an eclectic homeschooler, so I don't get in. I have a formal structure in education, but I do teach my kids. We sit down with the books, so I don't want to give the impression that it's all this hippy dippy lifestyle, that kind of thing. It is. It's that and more. It really is. And being a Muslim and having that we incorporate our deen into that is such a great advantage, and it's wonderful to be able to do that. So with my boys, and I'm going to talk about my boys a little bit because they're 13 months apart, and they we've always homeschooled them from the get-go. So we started at 2-3 years old, that kind of thing, and then their first sort of intro to a system was high school. And so I live up north on the countryside. So our local high school is a very homogenous, white school. Like there's like 95% like non-ethnic. Like there's just 5% ethnicity in that school. So now I'm thinking my kids are, they've never gone to school, and their first step into, brick and mortar is this school. So I was a little nervous about it because I really didn't know what to expect. And alhamdulillah, like they were okay. I think that part of the reason why they were okay is because as I was schooling them, I always my goal was that for them was always to be able to adapt to any environment you find yourself in. That's really important to teach that, because we don't know where we're going to be 5 years from now or 2 years from now, or even like for the children now, even that have to stay at home and not go to school. That's a change that you have to adapt to that.
Yes.
And we have to teach that to our children to be adaptable. So their experience in school was for them, it started off like a social project, because it was just all new to them, and but alhamdulillah, they managed okay. I think their peers, just the other day, both my sons were telling me how the people that their peers, they can't believe that they were homeschooled, because they have this idea that homeschools are backwards. They're not able to know how to socialize. They're like nerds, that kind of thing, and so they were very pleasantly surprised that they were in fact homeschooled. And I think that just touching on what Brother Omar was saying about just issues not being handled properly by the administration in a school and whatnot, I found that what I needed to do right from the get-go was I needed to be right in front of the principal, the guidance office, the counselor, and just kind of, we had to, my first interaction was, my kids got to leave for Jummah, like they have to be excused for that. And so they saw that I was, I was very open, and they saw, I kind of gave them a heads up that my children are homeschooled. So, just kind of keep an eye out for them, that kind of thing. And we'll do our part as well. And I think that really helped. So my whole idea of them going into this, completely, 95% non-Muslim environment, alhamdulillah, it was very positive. It was actually a very positive experience to have them go into school after the homeschooling experience. Alhamdulillah.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's a great story to hear. I wanted to ask, you both have shared very positive stories, and and you have shared the bright side of homeschooling, all the good stuff about homeschooling. Are there any challenges you want to share with us that you face and many other homeschoolers face, that you may want to, that you want to sort of maybe warn, of course, those who want to plunge into homeschooling starting this September, let's say? What would be, let's say, the top 3 challenges, maybe, if any, if you want to share? Brother Omar, we'll start with you, and Sister Munazza, you can share the top 3 challenges that you or other common challenges that others face as homeschoolers.
Thank you. So one of the first challenges that a lot of people do face, and they're probably curious about, is curriculum, and choosing a curriculum that is suitable for you as a homeschool family. Where do you begin from, especially if you're not a qualified teacher? So as I mentioned, you don't have to be a teacher. There are a number of resources available for homeschoolers, and most of them are available online, and most of them are free. If you are curious, we used the Montessori curriculum when our kids were quite young, and then after the age of 6, we then used, for math and English and science, we adapted the US curriculum. We found it to be 1 grade above the Ontario curriculum, and we were very comfortable with it. My wife, who's a primary educator in the home for our kids, was very comfortable and able to use the material, and it was designed for non-teachers to use, the ones that we were able to find. So it was very easy for the kids to be self-directed in some cases, but also as a parent to be able to have pre-teaching available, and then being able to walk through a lesson with your kids and support them. So that, and definitely a lot of resources are available through the TMH. The TMH it has been a huge savior for a lot of homeschooling families. We have definitely benefited from the TMH and also from the personal classes that Sister Munazza offers at her home and her location, and a wide variety of other homeschoolers who do provide a lot of support. So the second issue that a lot of people do worry about is socialization of kids. And so you want to provide a social outlet, that's fine. A lot of opportunities, field trips are arranged through the TMH and other homeschooling groups that are available in your communities. And also there are quite a number of institutions that offer classes during the day at a discounted rate for homeschoolers. For example, Making Waves, which is a franchise swimming, teaching kids how to swim. They have various locations around Ontario, and they provide daytime classes for homeschoolers at a discounted rate. Gymnastics classes, karate classes, arnis classes, kickboxing classes. There are a number of activities available, especially if you're concerned about being physical and taking the kids outside during winter months and things like that. There's the MYSL, which is the Muslim Youth Soccer League, run in the Peel area, and so in the GTA actually. So there are a number of opportunities. The third area that was concerning for us really was behavior, and that can be very tricky, because you are a parent, the kids see you as their mother or father, and how do you change? When I'm at school, I'm Mr. Zia. When I'm home, I'm their father. So you kind of have to work with your kids around understanding the different roles that we're playing. Them as a student versus them as a child, parent as an educator versus parent, as a support provider or caregiver. So having that delineation, what we decided to do is, if you're interested to know, is we created a classroom in our home, in the basement, and then also upstairs. So there are various places in the home that were classroom spaces, and during the day hours. So it was easy for our kids to kind of figure, okay, we're in the classroom now. Now we're in the lab. Now we're in the reading nook. So there were different places we would take them to help them, just mentally shift from space to space. It wasn't always perfect, didn't always work. And even now, as our kids are at home with us, there are times that as they get older and they're going through their tweens and their teens, those are experiences that you're going to experience no matter where you are, whether you're homeschooling or not. So those are behavioral challenges, and there's a lot of, again, many resources in our community to help parents get through that part of life with our kids, whether at home or at school.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing some of the dilemmas of homeschoolers. Sister Munazza, what are top 3 challenges you faced or you face as a homeschooler today?
Okay. I think one thing is, it's different for me to share my challenges with you. Like, would you like for me to share some of the challenges that new homeschoolers might incur?
Because yes.
Yeah, because I think the reason why I'm suggesting that is because I chose to homeschool. That was a choice that I made. A lot of parents who aren't comfortable with sending their kids back to school, this was not a choice for them. So their challenges are going to be very different than my own. And I would say that one of the main challenges is that it'll be a personal struggle that they'll be facing, that the pressure of having to educate their children. I think that's going to be a very big challenge for them, thinking that they can't do it, thinking that they're not good enough, they're not smart enough to do it. I think that these are some things that everyone should be comfortable with and know that it's going to be okay. That, if you don't, just because you're not a teacher doesn't mean you cannot educate your children. There's so many resources out there right now, and that online, even TMH is an excellent resource to join, even for a year. It's a very nominal fee to join, and you get a lot of support from there and ideas. So just know that you can do it as a parent. And another big challenge is the children themselves. Now, if your child is having a relatively good experience while they were in school, and even the ones that aren't really having the best experience in school, they're gonna miss school. They're gonna miss being at school and going to school, and last thing, they're not going to want to be like, okay, mom, I'll finish I'll finish reading my book, or I'll do my times tables, or, it's not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. And I just want to, my heart goes out to these children, because sometimes parents, what they tend to do is put their worries on them and not really orchestrate themselves and how they're going to deal with their children, because the parents are going through this experience, but so are the children, and it doesn't really matter how old they are. All these children are going through a big change, because all they've known is school. And so I really urge parents in September to kind of just take some time to adapt to, if they're not sending their kids back to school and they're doing, whether it's virtual, whether they're doing homeschooling, is really give themselves some time to plan and inform themselves, and and build that confidence to have their children in home, because and that's going to be the another big challenge is just having your kids around all the time. It's like 24/7. You just can't get rid of them, and that's another thing that's you have to adjust yourself to. And so, although curriculum is definitely important, at this point with the pandemic, there's just so much more going on, so many more emotions that are being, tossed, and it's just a big, just pool of emotions coming from everywhere, from in the house, out of the house. And I really urge parents to really make that the focus, and not worry about, if they miss, a few months of education, the formal education, because that'll eventually you can teach your children curriculum, but you have to take this opportunity to teach your children how to be good people and patient, and really give back. Like, this is an opportunity. I see this as being a great opportunity to instill certain values in our children that perhaps they couldn't be able to do if they continued on with their regular lives, right? So yeah, so I think really we have to focus on our children's emotions and our own as well.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I mean, I think anecdotally you hear a lot of parents say this or express the fact that the real education started the day pandemic or the lockdown started, because that's when we started really bonding and talking about things that actually matter in life, and even life skills, in fact, that matter in future. So that was a very interesting conversation so far. I want to, as we end, I know you have both already throughout the conversation talked about some of the myths, and you have busted some of those myths as well, even through some of the stories you have told about your own kids going back to school, or other people's experiences. But I want you to just share with us maybe top 2 or 3 myths that people hear about or they think about, and in fact sometimes it scares them when it comes to homeschooling. So Brother Omar, would you like to share some myths, top 2 or 3 myths that you have come across and that deters a lot of people, and sometimes you have maybe even end up arguing with people because that's not true? So why don't you go ahead and start us off?
So one of the biggest areas of concern that people have expressed is the transition from homeschooling into a public school or another private school, but from homeschooling to schooling. And there isn't, as Sister Munazza mentioned, once you establish a connection with the administration, with the teachers from the get-go, or the guidance counselor from the get-go, you'll find that your kids are very well supported. I have actually, in the role of guidance counselor, have supported students coming from a homeschooling environment to a schooling environment, two sisters from the same family, and they transitioned very, very well, no issues at all. In my previous location, a whole family of 5 kids who over a period of 3 years transitioned from their homeschooling environment to a schooling environment, and again, no issues there either. They're very well behaved, they're very well academically. Currently, we have 1 student coming in September, transitioning from, during this awkward time, from homeschooling to schooling. And they're coming in next week to take a tour of the school. Again, no major issues there. As long as people, it's important to understand that when we're homeschooling, we are preparing our kids to be adaptable, to be flexible, to understand what society is like, and to be ready to interact with society in a wide variety of ways, including transitioning into a schooling environment. Another area of concern is around post-secondary. That will my child still be able to get to university and become a doctor, lawyer, engineer if they're homeschooled in their elementary years, even they're homeschooled in their secondary years? And the answer is absolutely yes. Every college and university across Ontario has a policy around homeschooling. Oftentimes, you have to finish your grade 12 university courses or a number of programs where you can transition as a homeschooler directly into a degree program or a diploma program. So take the time to research about those different policies that whatever institutions are interested in, how they do support homeschooling students coming out of a secondary homeschooling environment. If you choose, people are choosing to homeschool during high school years as well. Sociability, I kind of already touched upon that as well. Another area of concern. But in homeschooling, one of the areas that you teach your kids is how to do oral speeches, how to present, how to speak, and you provide opportunities for them to do so in the homeschool environment. And also, when homeschoolers do get together, there are opportunities for kids to as well to express themselves and to learn how to talk in a public arena. And again, there are a number of volunteer opportunities. Volunteering in Ontario, you have to have 40 hours of volunteer service before graduation. But volunteering is part of our faith-based identity, and so volunteering at a shelter, at a food bank, are things that you can do with your kids in those homeschooling years to start to help them acclimatize and understand their position in the world and how they can make the world a better place as well.
Inshallah. Great. Okay. I think you're muted. Let me see. Okay.
Sorry, I'm having to contend with these natural winds behind me here. Yeah. So sorry. So you just want me to dispel the myth? Sorry, I had to switch devices.
In the next couple of minutes that we have, yes, that's correct. Please.
Okay. I think the one really big myth of that homeschooling has is definitely the socialization aspect of it. I think a lot of that just because you're going to school and you're surrounded by hundreds of people, that somehow you just become a better social creature, and that's not necessarily true, because as a homeschooler you're rather diverse in who you socialize with, because you're going to the grocery stores, or you're going to visit your grandparents, or you're going to the library or shopping or whatever it is. So you're constantly interacting with children and adults that are different from you, different ages, different ethnicities, everything, and that really gives them an opportunity to exercise their social skills on multiple levels, as opposed to if you're in a classroom stuck with 30 grade ones, it's all the same. So it's not just because you're around people doesn't necessarily mean that you're a stronger social creature. Homeschooling, once you're literally, when you're outside, you expect to behave properly, to be respectful, to be mindful, and you encourage that, and the people around you respond to that. They respond to that. Alhamdulillah, whenever we used to, with the homeschooling group, whenever we used to go to trips, it was unanimous. Every single organized, wherever we went, the organizers would say that these children are so well behaved, and that really stood out to them. So and they weren't dysfunctional, they weren't strange, and I can attest to that through my boys as well. Like I said earlier in the example, that they were very surprised that they were homeschooled. And so I think that it's that's a huge myth, and I think people are really worried about that, especially being a Muslim. They kind of think that if you're a Muslim and all around, you're just with Muslim families, and they're worried about that. They're not going to be able to adapt into a very non-Muslim world when they grow up. But really, at the end of the day, that is a pure myth. You teach your children. The wonderful thing is that you're able to teach your children about diversity through your through your own lens. You're able to teach your children how what's important, and it's a very focused. So you can teach them that it's diversity is a good thing and whatnot. But definitely, I would say that number one is the myth thing, the socialization.
Excellent. Thank you. So we have just time for one quick questions at the end. I'll ask Brother Omar specifically, those parents, which is probably 95% of the parents out there right now, who are having a hard time, of course, at this point, trying to figure out what to do with their kids, even if they're not considering the idea of homeschooling. Maybe virtual school, or maybe just have so much anxiety right now about sending their kids back to school. What advice do you have for parents in general at this point, because you're a guidance counselor, you're a public school educator, and you're a homeschooler as well. What advice would you give to the parents who are at this point going through a very challenging time, and of course kids as well?
So it's hard to give advice in such a broad perspective. I would say that if you are planning on going back to school, be safe. Follow the guidelines that your board has designed for the kids. Pay attention to your teachers, and keep your masks on. Keep your distance as much as possible, and allow the board to kind of figure things out. This has never happened before, so be patient with your teacher, be patient with your school and your board of education while they try to figure things out, logistics and how they're going to work and how they can best support the safety element around the classroom environment. And if your kids are going to be at home with you, my advice to you is to provide structure for them so they do remain to be engaged online. Make sure they follow the timeline set out with however the online structure is set up, and take this time as hopefully you already have been taking this time. Take this time, as Sister Munazza already mentioned, to connect with your kids, to really solidify the bond between parent and child and between sibling and sibling. This is a golden time to do that, a time we've never had in the history, not within living history, I would say maybe last 100 years we haven't had this opportunity like we have now. So take advantage of it as much as you possibly can, to spend time together as a family, to do things together as a family, and to try to develop some sense of normalcy so that the concept of fear and anxiety isn't always on the forefront of our minds, but we feel safe and secure in our homes, and we feel that we're progressing in our education as time goes on.
Wonderful. Sister Munazza, can you please share with those of us who are new to homeschooling and they don't know anything about TMH, or the Toronto Muslim Homeschoolers, what can you tell us about Toronto Muslim Homeschoolers? What kind of support they can get from TMH? Anything else specifically in the next 1 minute we have or so, if you can share, that would be great, about TMH and other sources of support.
Sure. No, absolutely. Okay, so Toronto Muslim Homeschoolers. So we had started that about, it's been about a good 14, 15 years now, and it's a homeschooling support. It's a Muslim homeschooling support group, and what's great about it is that we have monthly meetings, which really helps a homeschooling family through the struggles of homeschooling. Both on a curriculum level and also an emotional level as well. There's just the struggles of it. So you could definitely join everyone. It is a Muslim homeschooling group, and we purposely kept it Muslim homeschooling because it is Muslim homeschoolers have different struggles than non-Muslim homeschoolers, and we just wanted to maintain that and be able to support them. So it's been around for a while. You can just, the website, I just saw that right now. You can just go onto the website and just become a member. It's a nominal fee, and there's a whole bunch of different plan subscriptions as well for math, for world issues, and it's great. And that's part of the perk of joining the support group as well. And the monthly meetings, that's the bread and butter of the group. That's a forum that you can just ask all your questions and your challenges, whether it's curriculum, whether it's time management, anything like that. So it's an excellent resource to have. Definitely.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brother Omar Zia, Sister Munazza Mukri. That was a wonderful conversation, a much needed conversation that people need to hear from homeschoolers themselves, and I hope, inshallah, it's going to be part of a bigger conversation that we're going to have on an ongoing basis on Canada Today, inshallah, on a regular basis. But hopefully, this conversation and this session today would help at least people ease some of the anxieties some parents have, and maybe provide an alternative. So thank you so much. Once again, really appreciate your very insightful conversation today.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, folks, whether your kids are going back to school, to a physical school starting a week or two tomorrow from now, or they're Zooming at home, meaning going to a virtual school, or they are getting into a traditional homeschooling environment. Whatever path you choose, we pray that your path and your children's path is full of blessings. We hope and we pray that you are, inshallah, going to exercise all protocols of safety and, inshallah, have the best ever educational experience, inshallah. With that, we're going to have to end our wonderful conversation today with Omar Zia and Munazza Mukri. We look forward to having them again, and we look forward to seeing you as an audience, a wonderful audience again in the near future. I want to also thank our wonderful team of producers who are with us today, who do the magic behind the scenes, and TorontoMuslim.com and Dawanet for its marketing partnership. Jazakumullah khairan. Once again, this is Taha Ghayyur from Canada today on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.